Okay, even though I'm not a sociologist, thank you for inviting me to talk here. The English is my fourth language, so so you should take it in your consideration. Um, I wrote the title of this presentation, which is a title that have a kind of argument. The Arab world, a gay heaven and hell for gay men. I will explain this argument, but first I want to cite the Joseph Mas'ad, the well-known philosopher from Columbia University. He's a Jordanian, Palestinian, American who wrote about again the categories of the gay and lesbian, Western categories of the gay and lesbian and its effect on the Arab world. The category gay and lesbian are not universal at all and can only be universalized by the epistemic, ethical, and political violence unleashed on the rest of the world by the very international human rights advocates whose aim is to defend the very people their intervention is creating. As Gili was talking for me, the Middle East is in the Western images, and I don't talk about the Tel Aviv, because Tel Aviv it's a kind of a ghetto in the Middle East. I talk about the open Middle East. Is described as homophobic place and homoerotic place at the same time, and I will explain that later from my experience also. Most Arab states criminalize anal sex by law, considering it sort of prostitution and not male sex, not specifying male sex. That's why the problem in the Arab states, it's not the two men having sex together. The problem is with the anal sex, because it's denied in the Islamic and the Christian religious. So that's why the lesbian relationships, it's more accepted and more even represented in the popular culture, in the cinema, in the radio, in the not radio, cinema, TV shows, and the literature. At the same time, public spaces in the Arab country are considered to be gay friendly because they are thin barriers between brotherhood, friendship, love, and bodily desires between men. You can ask me about it. I mean the male-to-male relationships in the Arab world and the Arab society, even in the Palestinian society in Israel, is very complicated. The barriers between the sexual desire and the brotherhood and friendship are very, very thin. So it's part of the culture, and it's not like Oriental thought. Oman, Tunis, Morocco, Amman City, downtown Cairo, and Wadi Ram in Jordan are considered gay male heaven, both globally and in the Arab world, for dragging and practicing accidental sex. It's very well known that Tunis, for example, or Morocco are very sexually active in this time, but The authorities, on the other hand, exercise force, including arrest in an occasional way. It's not systematical way. Not every gay practice is denied. It's forced like in occasional, in seasonal way, and usually for political considerations. When the authorities try to be more conservative than the religious parties. And another thing that I didn't write here is that the elite of the regimes trying to revenge each other by, for example, sending the police to arrest the gay son of it happened in Egypt in 2001, in the famous case of the Nile boat. It appears that it was like a revenge between two powerful men in the society. The interesting thing is that most of the violence crimes, including murder, committed by citizens, that's not committed by authorities, by citizens, were against feminine gay men and transgender people. The last one was the last famous crime was against Hamoudi al-Materi, 15 years old, who was brutally murdered in central Baghdad last October, and it was a very known case, and all the queer community in Facebook and in the social media was like made a hidad, that means evil, mourning. According to that background, following the cold Arab Spring, there was a rising interest of the mass media and the academic world in issues of sexuality in the Arab world in general and in male-to-male sexuality in particular. The lack of research on the communication patterns of Arab men interested in sexual liaison with the other men is therefore quite surprising. During my master thesis was held in 2014, before a lot of dramatic things that happens in, especially in Syria and Iraq, but I think it's very relevant to today. My research was about sexual discourse of Arab men who have sex with other men, as expressed in the dating portal Manjam. It's like kind of gaydar, but it's very widely popular in the Middle East, Iran and Afghanistan and Pakistan, those countries. تمافير بصدر لطفا انت لو ما هو زاز. In my research, I checked the way those men use Western dating internet sites designed according to the Western conceptualization of homosexual identity. The Manjam is designed and based in London, and it's a Western dating site of everything. So my interest was to check how local people who looking for sex, casual sex with other people in the same country, using a Western site or Western portal, and the tension between the language used by the surfers in order to express their desires and sexual conceptions on the one hand, and the Western language of sexual identity assumed by the internet medium in which those texts are written and read on the other hand. We all see that the dating sites is designed by Western concepts of values, and my question was how Arab local person will use this kind of categories. The portal is called Manjam. I don't know if it's still exists. The method of my research, it was based on profiles and statuses sampled from the website Manjam. I studied how Arab men who have sex with other men present their sexuality by identifying the system of concepts and metaphors used for this purpose. The research was done at one point, at a point of time, and compared surfers from countries which are more exposed to the West, Jordan and Lebanon, with countries that are less exposed, Iraq and Syria. This comparison of the sexual discourse in the four countries enabled me to identify the impact of the global Western discourse on homosexual practices and self-perception of the men in the Arab world. The information in each user's car was divided into two categories. How the user expressed his sexuality by filling out the predetermined fields such as age, sexual identity, sexual role, hair color, penis size, etc. This part included the picture attached to the profile. I will talk now about the picture. It was a very interesting finding. Text written freely by users, both in the status line, which appears outside the profile and is used to attract other users, and inside the profile to add more personal information on the users and his intentions. The findings were divided into three topics. Each carries a comparison between the four countries, including in the study Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. The first topic included the identification of language used by the surfers, Arabic, English, Kurdish, etc. In Iraq there is two languages, it's Arabic and Kurdish. And in the case of Arabic language, the type of Arabic spoken local dialects or standard Arabic, as well as the diversity of terms used by users to express their sexuality and desires. The second topic analyzes the reference to sexual identity and the big question, does the surfers identify themselves as gays, for example, or just men who have sex with other men? The third topic was based on analytic of the desired body as expressed by user in describing themselves and the men they desires. This Western hegemonic muscularity, which was the lecture of Daphna this morning about it. The findings show that the global homosexual discourse has limited influence on the way Syrian and Iraqi surfers expressed their sexuality. For example, a lot of surfers use songs of Abd al-Halim, Hafiz and Kulthum to express their desire. They use another kind of text, of body of text. For example, songs of Kulthum, Abd al-Halim, which was Abd al-Halim, for knows the sculpture, who in his songs he talk with the woman and the men بجوف של גבר.
Male second person.
Yes, like in a male to male love. This is evident in the relatively rare use of the Western categories of sexual orientation, and in the absence of the erotic male images dominant in the West. I compared in my research the images that used in atraf dating in Israel with the images used in manjam. The manly man was categorized in other way, was identified in the fat body and belly. He has a huge body. And the feminine man was very thin and very, عدين كذا. And that leads me to the well-known theory in the Arabic culture called, in Islamic culture, the Sheikh and the apparentist model. The sexuality which built in the sheikh, the teacher, and the pupil, or sexual tension. The discourse in those two countries, and especially in Iraq, is based on accentuating the binary gender separation of women and men, and clearly distinguishing the passive and the active sexual role, therefore feminine and masculine. As expected, the globalization of sexual identities and images of the desirable homosexual body is much most evident in linguistic and cultural choices of users from Lebanon and Jordan, especially from the former two countries, Iraq and Syria. The main feature common to the four countries is that surfers focus on sexual practice rather than on sexual identities. It's very rare to see a sentence like "I'm a proud gay," or there are almost no expression of political affiliation in sexual communities. The fair surfers do not move within fixed boundaries of sexual identities, but freely express their desire, concrete intentions, and the sexual self. And I think the most important conclusion for this conference, that the policies aimed at increasing gender equality will reduce male dominance and will allow more gender fluidity, thus protecting those who transgress gender and sexual boundaries, not less important than pro-LGBT right laws. What I want to see that to say that the problem in those countries and in the Arab society, in Palestinian society in Israel, there is a problem of gender, and not the LGBT right. The LGBT right will become after the having laws in all the countries that protect the transgender or the feminine from violence in the streets. And I think that it's also in Israel, like the case of Jerusalem that you say. Thank you.